Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take sources, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we really try to pull out the key insights, the nuggets of knowledge. Our goal, basically give you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, maybe with a few surprising facts, and hopefully keep it engaging. Today, we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really ancient text, Psalm 14, but through a specific lens that gives it some surprisingly provocative, almost modern-feeling claims about belief and human nature. Our source is this study called MCS Psalm 13, but we're focused on the section titled Psalm 14, The Atheist Deception. And this study, it offers a really unique interpretation of these verses. It definitely challenges some common assumptions we might have today. It's pretty compelling, actually, what these ancient words read this way suggest about, the human heart and maybe our deeper motivations.
Indeed. And our aim here in this deep dive is really to unpack the specific perspective offered just by this source. We're not saying this is the only way to read Psalm 14, but what this study suggests. We'll explore how it interprets the psalm to suggest reasons why people might deny a creator and the implications of that denial according to this text. It's definitely an interpretation that makes you think, encourages some critical thought about human behavior, and maybe your own understanding of the world.
Okay, let's get into it then. Psalm 14, verse 1. The source interprets it starting with, "Fools say in their hearts there is no God." Okay, seems straightforward enough, but then the study makes this, immediate leap. It asserts there's no such thing as an atheist in the real sense. That's a bold claim right out of the gate. So how does this ancient text, through this specific interpretation, actually explain that? How does it get there?
Well, what's really central to this study's interpretation is the idea that humanity was created with something inherent, like a consciousness. The source uses the term common sense.
Common sense, okay.
Yeah, and this consciousness, this common sense, according to the text, it instinctively recognizes the fact that there is a God that is the creator of all things. So from this viewpoint, it's not really about someone lacking the intellectual capacity or just never encountering the idea of God.
So the foolishness it talks about isn't intelligence.
Exactly. The study argues it's not about a lack of IQ or reasoning ability. It positions it as a lack of response to this common sense. It suggests the person the psalm calls a fool is actively, deliberately trying to make himself believe that there is no God.
Wow, actively trying.
Yes. It's presented as a kind of suppression. Not a natural state of non-belief, but an effort against an innate knowledge. Imagine trying to convince yourself the sky isn't blue when deep down you know it is.
Okay, so it's not framed as genuine ignorance or someone just thinking it through rationally and landing there. It's presented as a conscious act. Self-deception, really. And then the source makes this really striking connection. It claims the reason people try to believe this, well, calls it nonsense, is because they want to live a corrupt life. That's a very strong, maybe even controversial link. Disbelief tied directly to a desire for a certain lifestyle.
Precisely. The study doesn't paint it as, say, an intellectual journey to non-belief. It frames it as a conscious choice. And that choice is driven by wanting a lifestyle that the text views as inherently corrupt.
Right.
So this raises a big question the source seems to tackle implicitly.
Right.
What does this interpretation say about our motivations? It suggests that maybe what we want to be true heavily influences what we allow ourselves to believe, even if it pushes against some, innate sense of truth or accountability. It's like wanting freedom from moral boundaries for, self-interest.
Okay, so that's the individual fool, but then the psalm seems to broaden out, right? Verses 2 and 3. It says, "From heaven Adonai observes humankind to see if anyone has understanding, if anyone seeks God. But all turn aside, all alike are corrupt. No one does what is right, not a single one." And Adonai here, that's a Hebrew name for God, often translated as Lord. This sounds like it's talking about everyone, a universal thing.
Yes, and connecting this to the bigger picture from the source, it explains this as a universal human condition. The study states, all of us are born with this desire to do our own thing. And this desire is commonly called the sin nature.
The sin nature.
Right. The study highlights it as this deep-seated tendency in all people, a sort of bias towards self-determination that, in this view, often clashes with the creator's intentions or design. It's not just some people, but everyone starts, from this perspective, with this inherent push to prioritize their own will.
Okay, so this sin nature, this desire to do our own thing, isn't just for the people who, according to the source, actively say there is no God. It sounds like it's saying that everyone, whether they acknowledge God or not, has this inherent bent towards self-interest, away from what the text calls right. Bam. So What does that actually look like? How does this universal tendency play out according to the psalm and the study? Does everyone react to it the same way?
That's a really key point in the analysis. It stresses this universal tendency to put self first, before any external moral guidepost. And this inherent inclination, then, leads people down one of two paths, according to the psalm, anyway. How you respond to that common sense we talked about and this sin nature sort of determines which path you end up on.
Okay. And that brings us to verse 4. It makes a pretty stark division. Don't they ever learn, all those evildoers who eat up my people as if eating bread and never call on Adonai?
The source mentions that as we grow up, learn truth, we basically join one of two groups. So what defines these groups? The evildoers versus who else?
Right. The study describes the evildoers mainly by their extreme selfishness. It says they have no consideration for others. But what's really insightful, I think, from the text perspective is the observation that this deep selfishness brings paranoia.
Paranoia, how so? It leads them to believe everyone else is like them. It's not just about their actions. It affects their whole internal world. They kind of project their own self-serving motives onto everyone else. So if they're always trying to get ahead by, stepping on people,
they assume everyone else is doing the same to them.
Exactly. That's the implication in the source. It fosters this pervasive distrust, a constant looking over your shoulder, maybe.
That's quite a psychological insight the source is pulling out there. It paints this picture of constant competition, like a race. A race to get everything you can before someone else gets what you want and to prevent them from taking it from you. It's a very specific mindset being attributed here, a kind of zero-sum game.
Yeah, a zero-sum game where every interaction is about personal gain, self-preservation, often, at others' expense. And then, in contrast, the other group is called my people.
My people.
Those who, as the source puts it, have a desire to follow the ways of their Creator. So the psalm, through this interpretation, it really draws a clear line between these two paths. They're defined by their basic orientation. Is it towards self-gratification, self-protection at all costs? Or is it towards aligning with the Creator's ways? The first path is shown as self-focused, ultimately destructive, even internally, while the second is presented as finding refuge, stability in that alignment. It shapes their whole life, how they see the world.
Okay, but then the psalm takes another interesting turn, focusing on the internal state of the evildoers, verses 5 and 6. There they are, utterly terrified, for God is with those who are righteous. You may like the plans of the poor, but their refuge is Adonai. That seems contradictory. Why would people who supposedly say there is no God, or live totally self-serving lives, be utterly terrified?
Yeah, it does seem like a puzzle at first glance. But the source explains this terror by saying that despite their outward claims or their lifestyle, deep down they know that God exists and that they are in fact opposing the Creator of the universe.
So the denial isn't total deep down.
That's the suggestion. That their denial or the suppression of that common sense, it's ultimately superficial. It creates this internal conflict, maybe cognitive dissonance. Their outward stance doesn't match a deeper, unsettling awareness they can't fully shake. So their terror in this reading is that inherent common sense bubbling up, the one they've tried to push down. It's like an internal alarm they can't switch off.
So trying to deny it doesn't actually extinguish that awareness. It just buries it, leading to this underlying fear. And then, for the other group, the righteous, those who desire to follow the Creator, their refuge is Adonai. It's a really powerful contrast the source highlights. Internal dread versus secure refuge. One group living in fear, the other finding deep security.
Exactly. The psalm, interpreted this way, paints these two very different internal landscapes, and it ties them directly to whether they're oriented towards or away from the Creator. For the source, this goes beyond just intellectual belief. It's about the deep psychological, even spiritual consequences of those fundamental choices we make. It suggests within this framework, there's no real peace or security in that self-deception or in actively opposing what you maybe intrinsically know.
Right. And then finally, David, the attributed author of the psalm, he ends it on this note of hope, but also consequence, verse 7. How I wish Israel's salvation would come out of Sion. When Adonai restores his people's fortunes, Yaakov will rejoice, Israel will be glad. Okay, so Sion is Zion, Jerusalem. Yaakov is Jacob, Israel the people. It sounds like a look towards the future, an ultimate resolution.
That's how the source interprets it. It concludes by emphasizing the assurance that there is coming a day of judgment, a time when the Lord will restore his people. So it provides this framework of ultimate justice, ultimate restoration within the song story. It suggests the way things are now, where maybe the evildoers seem to be winning or prospering. That's not the final word. There's a future reckoning, a reestablishment of divine order.
A judgment day.
Yes. And, significantly, the study points out the flip side. There is an alternative for the evildoers, which is eternal punishment. So this whole concept of salvation and judgment, as presented in the sources reading of Psalm 14, it really underlines this idea of profound choice and consequence for everyone. It reinforces the themes of accountability, divine justice. It seems to say that while that sin nature might be universal, the path you ultimately choose and its end result depends on how you respond to that innate common sense and the pull towards the Creator.
Wow. Okay. What a deep dive that was. We've really unpacked Psalm 14 through the specific interpretation offered by this study, The Atheist Deception. We looked at its pretty surprising claims about atheism itself, the idea that from this view, there's no such thing because of this inherent common sense about a creator. We explored the universality of the sin nature as the source defines it, those two distinct paths, the evildoers versus my people, and the implications, the internal terror versus secure refuge, and then this ultimate picture of judgment or salvation. It really is fascinating how an ancient text, seen through this particular interpretive lens, offers such a pointed analysis, psychological, spiritual, and it still feels relevant today somehow, giving us this unique way to think about human motivations, our choices, our beliefs. It definitely makes you ponder what might be going on beneath the surface.
Indeed. And this deep dive into Psalm 14, again, specifically through our sources interpretation, it really prompts some reflection, doesn't it? Like, what does this ancient perspective suggest about the real roots of our beliefs, or perhaps our lack of belief? How might that echo in human behavior today? Does this whole concept of an inherent common sense that recognizes a creator, does that challenge how you personally think about belief and disbelief?
Yeah.
Something to consider.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new nuggets of knowledge, maybe sparked an aha moment or two. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep deep diving.